Hey, everybody. It is Friday, August 8th. You're listening to the Mo News podcast. I'm Moshe Winunu here in beautiful Sundance, Utah.
And I am Jill Wagner. This is the place where we bring you just the facts.
And we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. A heads up to all of you as you make your weekend plans. August 9th, tomorrow, is National Book Lovers Day. We love books here on the podcast. Our audience, many of you in the Mo News community, avid readers. We did a survey last year. The number of you who read 50 to 100 books a year is pretty incredible, actually. Embarrasses me and Jill. And so I know a number of you that will probably be celebrating National Book Lovers Day. But if you're looking to get away from things, go crack a book open if you can tomorrow, if you're not shuttling your kids around.
I'm embarrassed to say that I have a book on my nightstand, and I literally, the print is so small, or at least my eyes are so bad, that I can't read it.
Are we entering the reading glass era, Jill?
We are. And every once in a while I forget. I'm like, wait, why is this book still here? So I'll pick it up and I'm like, oh, that's why.
Oh, the words are too small.
Yes. And then I actually had the nerve to say to my husband, I think they're making smaller print in books. And he's like, Jill, it's time. You need glasses.
Yeah. No, you start to see it happening. Like, I feel like I've been in restaurants that are not darker than restaurants I've been in the past, but I'm just like, I can't read the menu. Somebody bring a light over here. Maybe that's the first sign.
Moshe, we're getting old.
My father likes to say that his grandfather, so my great-grandfather, the only piece of advice that he gave him was, don't get old.
My dad says
I don't know what you can
do
with that. I don't know what you can do with that piece of advice, but...
All right, let's get to some headlines, starting with the economy. President Trump's tariffs officially take effect, and 10 is the new 0. We'll explain.
We'll explain what it means for business, consumers, and what, well, we still don't know.
Meanwhile, Mo News talks to a Democratic Texas representative currently in hiding out of state over the redistricting plan, how he thinks all of this could end.
Yeah, we will hear more from Jill's interview yesterday.
Overseas, Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says Israel intends to capture all of Gaza and then hand it over to Arab forces.
We'll tell you how practical this is, Jill, and whether we think it might actually happen.
In health news, how much of kids' caloric intake is coming from ultra-processed foods? We've got the numbers.
Too much is your headline.
And an alarming study about ChatGPT and kids. The AI chatbots giving teens dangerous advice when it comes to drugs, alcohol, and even suicide. And a first for the MLB, the first woman set to umpire an MLB game happening Saturday. We'll tell you about her. Plus, it is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend, what we are watching, reading, and eating.
Book Lovers Day. Well, and actually, I just read it's Book Lovers Week next week, Jill, so not too much pressure tomorrow.
Okay, starting with the economy. After months of delays, pauses, and extensions, President Trump's sweeping tariffs officially kicked in yesterday. President Trump was online to celebrate, writing on Truth Social, "It's midnight. Billions of dollars in tariffs are now flowing into the United States of America." That was in all caps. Moshe, Jay-Z has a song. It's called 30 is the New 20. He is referring to age, but in this case, 10 is the new 0, meaning 10% is the new baseline tariff. The average tariff rate is more than 18%, making it the highest since 1935. That's the Great Depression, as FDR was trying to bolster the U.S. economy, though ultimately they were not very successful back then.
Yeah, you might remember the scene from Ferris Bueller where Ben Stein is asking people about the Smoot-Hawley tariffs. Bueller. Anyway, those are those infamous tariffs from the early 1930s. They helped lead to record high unemployment. It was a different time. There was a global depression happening. The question is, this time around, how effective or hurtful will they be? Remember, the ultimate Trump goal here is to get major U.S. companies to bring manufacturing back to America. And he's had some announcements, right? Including in the past 48 hours, he had the Apple CEO in the Oval Office, Apple promising $600 billion in new investment. They actually had already said earlier this year, $500 billion. They upped it to $600 billion this week. We'll see if they make good on it. We'll see if any of these companies make good on it. Trump says that he's going to hold them to it. But in the meantime, as there is this attempt to recalibrate the U.S. economy after 40 to 50 years of globalization movement, moving away from manufacturing, what will the pain be like in the meantime? When it comes to tariffs, ultimately, 70% of the US economy is dependent on consumer spending. You spending money, me spending money, everyone listening, spending money. Well, when things are more expensive, you spend less money. Well, what does that mean to the growth of the economy? And just for perspective here, Jill, when you say the average tariff is about 18%, what we can call a consumption tax, right? Because a lot of stuff comes from abroad. So it's effectively a tax on those products. Well, in modern history, the average tariff rate in the US has basically been between 2 and 3%. So this is 6 to 8x above that. And so there's a lot that we'll be watching for in the coming months.
One economics reporter on Thursday said the grand tariff experiment has begun. And that's because we really won't know the full impact of these tariffs for quite a while. So they vary per country. The tariffs or taxes on all goods coming from the UK are 10%, the EU at 15%. Taken together, that 27 nation bloc is the largest US trading partner. Cambodia, where we get a lot of clothing, 19%, China, 30%, India, 25%, with the chance that it goes up to 50% as a potential punishment for buying oil from Russia, Switzerland, 39%, Vietnam, 20%. So a reminder here, tariffs are taxes on imports. They are collected by the federal government, and the companies that pay the import costs will have to figure out what they want to do. Do they eat the costs? Do they ultimately pass those costs onto their consumers, aka Americans? Is it a combination of both? Yale's budget lab calculates that the inflationary effect of tariffs will cost a typical household on average as much as $2,400 this year. One of the biggest impacts will be on clothing, consumers facing potentially 40% higher prices for shoes, 38% for apparel in the short run anyway, as retailers that rely on importing clothes from South and Southeast Asia will shift supply chains or just figure out what to do with higher costs. There are many economists, though, who say that consumers aren't really going to feel the impact for a little bit now, for a few more months, given that some retailers stocked up on some items before the tariffs took effect. But eventually those stockpiles will run out and they're going to have to import more goods with those new tariffs in place.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting, Jill, also politically speaking, because next year you have midterm elections, Republicans looking to keep the House and the Senate. And if you don't start to really feel the tariffs and the prices till next year, well, that goes into the election cycle. So a lot of questions there as to how long these will be in place, if there'll be some sort of declaration of victory after a few months and then they bring them down, or how, sort of in it to win it is the president right now. As far as your questions as to what's going to be impacted here, it's a little bit of everything, right? You got appliances from the EU, Japanese cars, furniture and toys from China, TVs from South Korea, and the negotiations continue here. So this is not the final story. You mentioned the 25% tariffs from India. He's threatening, actually, the president is threatening 50% tariffs on India by the end of the month if they continue to buy oil from Vladimir Putin. So stay tuned for that. Brazil, one of the countries that's been really pushing back hard on Trump. In this case, Trump has put tariffs in place on Brazil, even though we have a trade surplus with Brazil, because he doesn't like how they're treating the former president, Jair Bolsonaro, a buddy of his who's on trial right now for January 6th, like his own version of January 6th down there in Brazil. So he's been saying, end the trial or tariffs. And they said no. And so he said tariffs. So that's what's happening there in Brazil. Ultimately, multiple negotiations still happening. A couple deals have been worked out here. Interestingly, the markets have taken this in stride. We didn't see any sort of collapse in the stock market. No major concerns yet with the bond market. There was that shock in April when he had Liberation Day, and I don't think the market was ready for those numbers. Well, now the market has priced in some of this. Nonetheless, I think the market will wait and see on the U.S. consumer and the impact there. And that's when you might see, it translating to stocks and a variety of things. Right now, very much, you're probably looking at a holding pattern for a lot of businesses. Looking at this, it's a wait and see situation. So that means you're probably not expanding. You're probably not hiring extensively right now, given the nervousness about how this works out. Notably, there was research this week from Gartner Research that in its measure of CEO confidence, it has fallen at one of the fastest paces ever to recessionary levels. The number is 78% of top executives now indicate they're implementing cost-cutting measures to safeguard performance. So there's nearly 8 out of 10 CEOs say they are looking at cost-cutting right now. And that is typically means we're at a recession level, but the economy isn't a recession. So a lot of things in flux here to watch. Jill, one aspect of this we'll be watching is what happens in the courtrooms right now. There are lawsuits happening against the Trump administration in regards to whether he has this emergency power authority to impose these across-the-board tariffs. This ultimately will end up in the Supreme Court. The administration has appealed lower court rulings, so look out for the Supreme Court to eventually rule on here on tariffs at some point over the next year.
Another piece of economic news we wanted to mention. On Thursday, President Trump announced that he has selected Stephen Miron, who is the chair of the Council of Economic Advisors, to a pivotal seat on the Federal Reserve Board of Governors. He's going to be replacing Adriana Kugler. She resigned on Friday. So Miron will be serving out Kugler's term, which ends on January 31st of next year. And in the meantime, President Trump says he's going to search for a permanent replacement.
A reminder, the Federal Reserve Board of Governors has 7 members.
And to be clear, this is just a member. This is not replacing Jerome Powell, who's the Fed chair. His term expires in May.
Though Trump would like it to expire today.
No, like yesterday.
Yeah, definitely yesterday.
Okay, now to the escalating fight in the Texas legislature, where federal law enforcement has now gotten involved. More than 50 Democratic state legislators who fled the state to block Republicans' redistricting effort are now in hiding. Texas Senator John Cornyn said that he had asked FBI Director Kash Patel for help in finding the lawmakers. Cornyn says Patel agreed to have the FBI cooperate with Texas state law enforcement to locate those legislators. For days, Texas Republicans have been threatening legal consequences for the state Democrats who are preventing a quorum. President Trump pushing Republican lawmakers to redraw their congressional maps mid-decade. It is something that happens every 10 years after the census is done. Trump saying, though, that they are, quote, entitled to an additional 5 seats in Congress. If passed, this would most likely allow Republicans to keep their slim majority in the House in the upcoming midterms. And it is really not clear what the FBI will do, if anything, if they are to actually locate the Democratic lawmakers.
Yeah, because they haven't broken a federal law here, Jill, and that's typically jurisdiction for the FBI. Maybe they call the Texas Rangers and they're like, hey, FYI, they're staying at this hotel. But in some cases, like, it's been pretty well promoted where some of these people are, but now, of course, like, they've gone into deeper hiding. But ultimately, the Texas Rangers don't have authority to, like, go state by state, like, arresting legislators saying you got to come back to work. Neither does the FBI. So this is something we'll watch here. It's interesting that it came from Cornyn, one of the 2 U.S. senators from Texas. The other one is Ted Cruz. Cornyn's up for re-election next year, Jill, and he has some people on the right who kind of view him as, like, too soft, not MAGA enough. So the fact that he's the one who called the FBI being like, we're going to bring those guys home, is very much Cornyn trying to show, hey, guys, I'm a serious guy, and I'm going to be, as far right as you need me to be. Notably, Jill, you spoke yesterday to one of the state representatives in hiding, that is Vincent Perez. He joined you from an undisclosed location, wouldn't tell us what state he was in. What did he tell you?
So I asked Perez a few times if he is concerned that the FBI is now involved and if he's worried about facing any kind of repercussions back in Texas. He really was not focused on that. He was really focused on the issue of these maps and what it will mean for the state if they are eventually passed.
Anybody who looks at what is being proposed by the Texas Republicans, I think, would be outraged. Whether you're Democrat, Republican, white, black, Latino, the maps that are being proposed are really outrageous. And we haven't seen anything like this since the 1960s, before the Voting Rights Act was even passed. And that's not an overstatement.
Perez argues that the new maps dilute the voting strength of Black and Latino residents by slicing up Democratic-leaning areas like Austin, Dallas, Houston, and parts of South Texas. Republicans, by the way, argue that in at least 3 of the 5 districts that they're hoping to capture, the people who drew the maps on the GOP side added more Hispanic voters. So they are betting that the Latino populations will continue to trend rightward as they did in the 2024 election. Now, as for how all of this ends, because we have been here before, Democrats fled the state back in 2021 in opposition of GOP voting restrictions. Eventually, they're going to need to come back, and Republicans have the votes to pass these new maps. So I asked him, what is the goal here? What does he consider a win, even if these maps were to eventually pass?
But this map is taking us back to the 1960s. So I think one win out of this process is that if more Americans and more Texans become aware, there should be collective outrage. And again, you don't have to be a Democrat to be upset by what's being proposed. Everybody, Democrats, Republicans, Black, white, Latino, everybody should be upset when we have a government that is being very selective in terms of numbers, but also racially in terms of the people that it's seeking to represent.
To your point, one of the things that has come out as there's been more media attention and we're looking at all of the different states and all of the different maps, Illinois, where a lot of your fellow Democrats went, it gets an F actually when it comes to gerrymandering. If you look at that map, it's very much gerrymandered. So would you be calling on that Democratic governor and that state, which is controlled by Democrats, to reverse some of what's happened in their state?
I think when you look at certain states that have taken politics out of the process, it is a much more fair process. When we, the Republicans always love to point to California, and they'll say, "Oh, well, this happens in California." No, it doesn't. The voters there took the initiative to pass a ballot referendum, and they put it in their constitution that they cannot gerrymander in the middle of the decade. They cannot take into consideration race and politics and other things. And when you look at the makeup of those districts, they are much more competitive and they are a lot fairer than what is being proposed in Texas. I think that's really the model for the nation. I think it's bad whether it's a Democratic state or a Republican state that they go down this route, because I think what we're seeing is that we're just seeing retaliation, and we're going to have maps that are going to be grossly unfair throughout the country. But I think that all maps across the country should recognize the principle of one person, one vote.
And I followed up with him by mentioning that in California, you do have Democratic Governor Gavin Newsom, who has said that he now wants to redistrict California as retaliation against Texas. So has New York's Democratic Governor Kathy Hochul. So I asked, is this the best approach? Is this really the way forward? And he said, look, what happens in Texas will have big implications throughout the country. But he says that he does not think that this is the way the U.S. should be going.
Jill, it was really interesting to hear his thoughts. I think one of the questions we're all asking is, how long will this last and how does it end? We know it's going to end. We know that in all likelihood, Texas will vote to do this redistricting. The question is, when do all these legislatures go back and what is the process? So that's something we will keep you updated on.
So after we finished recording, we were chatting a little bit, which is always when you get the best stuff, of course.
Right.
And I asked him, no, like for real, how long could you possibly not go home? And he said, look, he said it's a little easier for him because he does not have kids. He said he has dogs. And so that is his big concern. But he said for some of these legislators that have families and kids and jobs, it's very, very difficult.
Because being a legislator is a part-time job.
Now to the speed read, starting overseas, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu says that Israeli defense forces plan to take complete control of the Gaza Strip to defeat Hamas, but does not intend to govern it long term. He says the goal is to transfer power to Arab forces that will not threaten Israel and can give Gazans a better future. Netanyahu spoke to Fox News before an Israeli security cabinet meeting to vote on his proposal. And here is a bit of what he had to say. It starts with Fox's Bill Hemmer.
Are you saying today that you will take control of the entire 26-mile Gaza Strip, as it was 20 years ago to this month in 2005?
Well, we don't want to keep it. We want to have a security perimeter. We don't want to govern it. We don't want to be there as a governing body. We want to hand it over to Arab forces that will govern it properly without threatening us and giving Gazans a good life. That's not possible with Hamas. The only way that you're going to have a different future is to get rid of this neo-Nazi army.
Moshe, reminder, it was in 2005 under then Prime Minister Ariel Sharon that Israel completely withdrew from Gaza, dismantling settlements, evacuating Israelis, even going as far as to dig up Jewish graves.
Yeah, they didn't want to leave anything behind there. It was viewed as an experiment saying, listen, ultimately here with the peace negotiations already going into 15 years at that point, let's, from the Israeli perspective, give the Palestinians an opportunity to see what they do with self-rule in Gaza. Now, ultimately, within about 2 years between having an election, Hamas doing pretty well, and then Hamas effectively launching a coup on the Palestinian Authority and murdering a bunch of leaders there and taking over, that went south pretty quickly. That actually, the withdrawal in 2005 actually happened about this week, 20 years ago, Jill. A very painful period, and the lesson the Israelis have taken away from it is how can they trust a Palestinian state if what they saw in Gaza unfold over the last 20 years was it. From the Palestinian perspective, they felt like that was not enough, and so they felt that the experiment was insufficient, that the Israelis didn't give them enough freedom. But ultimately, for the Israeli perspective, and by the way, for a while, the Egyptians there on the other side of the border, Hamas running Gaza, spending most of the money building tunnels, building arms, etc., was viewed as a failure of leadership here. So Israel's trying to hit the reset button here. It was interesting to see that Netanyahu did that interview on Fox News, Jill. He will speak to foreign media, but he hates Israeli media. He calls them liberal, biased, deep state. So he has not done an interview for a very long time with Israeli media. That's frustrated some of the journalists over there. As for what comes next here, that's going to be the big question. The Israeli military already controls 75% of the Gaza Strip. The Gaza Strip, about 26 miles by about 8 miles, and has a population of just over 2 million people. Netanyahu and the Israeli government has no appetite to occupy the Gaza Strip long term, but they would like to hand it off to some leadership entity that is not Hamas. But that last 25% of Gaza, the Israelis don't currently control. That's where the hostages allegedly are kept. That is a huge Palestinian population with a huge responsibility over civilian needs, food distribution, etc. And that's where the Israeli military is like, no, we don't want to be involved in that. And ultimately here, we don't see much in the way of military dividends here at this point. We've achieved most of our mission in Gaza. That's what the military is telling Netanyahu. So we will see if this is just a threat, if they vote on this, and even if they approve it, when would this happen? How long will evacuations take place? You know, one of the primary places they may go first is Gaza City, what was pre-war the biggest city in Gaza, but it's going to take a month plus to clear out, to evacuate people before the Israeli military would roll in there. What will be the reality on the ground at that point? Will this ever come to fruition? I think there's a lot of people who doubt that there will be any scenario where the Israelis control 100% of Gaza, despite the Netanyahu threats here. But he's trying to throw it out there, especially as he's frustrated with Hamas and feels that they're not coming to the negotiation table. They view themselves as winning right now in the court of public opinion, international public opinion. So Netanyahu feels that he has to get more aggressive here. And so far, it appears Trump is behind him on this one.
For Mo News, ultra-processed foods make up over half of Americans' daily calories, with kids and teens consuming nearly 62% of their calories from these products. Adults, that number's at 53%, according to some data from the CDC. HHS Secretary RFK Jr. has called the U.S. food system a form of mass poisoning. Kennedy's Make America Healthy Again Commission, or MAHA, backed by President Trump, is expected to release some new strategies for restructuring the response to childhood disease within the next couple of weeks.
For context here, you mentioned the numbers here. Kids and teens consuming 62% of their calories from ultra-processed foods, adults 53%. Dietitians I spoke to say that number should be more like 10%. Now, there are no national guidelines for junk food at all. But again, you shouldn't be doing more than 10 to 15% of your daily caloric intake from these ultra-processed foods. What are we talking about? Chips, candy bars, breakfast cereals, sugar-sweetened beverages like the various sodas out there, ready-to-eat meals, baked goods. All those things are among what's considered ultra-processed foods. Hyper-palatable, containing little to no whole foods, low in dietary fiber, high in salt, high in sweeteners, high in unhealthy fats. The food industry argues that criticism of these products oversimplifies the issue, ignores economic realities for people. They feel that they unfairly target food items with this label, including sliced foods and yogurts that can fall in the ultra-processed category, but in some cases might have some nutritional benefits. Now, I will say there is one piece of silver lining here, Jill, when you look at the CDC numbers. When you look at the numbers back from 2013, 2014, adults were getting about 56% of their calories from ultra-processed foods. That's fallen to 53%. And kids, it fell from 64% to 62%, or just under 62% here. So it looks like we're making slight progress over this last decade, but not nearly enough if you talk to any nutritional experts.
To some tech news now from NPR and some new concerns about ChatGPT. Research from a watchdog group found that ChatGPT will tell 13-year-olds how to get drunk and high, instruct them on how to conceal eating disorders, and even compose a heartbreaking suicide letter to their parents if asked. The AP reviewed more than 3 hours of interactions between ChatGPT and researchers who were posing as vulnerable teens. The chatbot typically provided warnings against risky activity, but did go on to deliver startlingly detailed and personalized plans for drug use, calorie-restricted diets, or self-injury. The researchers at the Center for Countering Digital Hate also repeated their inquiries on a large scale, classifying more than half of ChatGPT's 1,200 responses as dangerous.
So the Center for Countering Digital Hate says they wanted to test the guardrails here. The CEO saying, well, the reaction was, oh my Lord, there are no guardrails. The guardrails are completely ineffective. They're barely there. If anything, they appear to be more of a fig leaf here. The center says that one of the most appalling things they saw was reading emotionally devastating suicide notes that ChatGPT generated for a fake profile for a 13-year-old, with one letter tailored to her parents and others tailored to siblings and friends. Now, OpenAI, which is the maker of the AI platform ChatGPT, viewed the report and says it's working on this, and it's trying to refine how the chatbot can identify and respond appropriately to what they call sensitive situations. They didn't directly address the report's findings or how ChatGPT affects teens, but said it is focused on getting these kinds of scenarios right with tools that, quote, better detect signs of mental or emotional distress. Jill, at this point, about 800 million people globally are using ChatGPT. That's according to a recent report by JP Morgan. That's about 10% of the world's population. In the US, more than 70% of teens are turning to AI chatbots for a variety of things, including companionship. And so that's one of the concerning aspects of this. If they're befriending these AI platforms, asking them these very personal questions, and these are the responses that they're getting, it's something that, again, as we talk about AI, it's not being regulated by Congress. Will these AI manufacturers ultimately be able to fix this themselves, or do they need some rules, laws, and regulations from the federal government? And of course, those would come with consequences for these AI companies.
And finally, from Axios, Major League Baseball has announced that a minor league veteran umpire will become the first female umpire ever to work a regular season Major League game. So on Saturday, look for Jen Pawol. She's going to be working both games of Saturday's doubleheader in the Marlins and Braves series in Atlanta. She's been a minor league umpire since 2016. The baseball commissioner says, quote, this historic accomplishment in baseball is a reflection of Jen's hard work, dedication, and love of the game. She has earned this opportunity, and we are proud of the strong example she has set, particularly for all women and young girls who aspire to roles on the field.
This is a big deal. Jen Pawol has been coaching amateur ball going back more than a decade. She now says this is a viable career path for both men and women, and understands this will hopefully be inspirational to other young girls. She made her way up through the various ranks of baseball, reaching AAA ball in 2023. At that stage, she was the first female umpire in 34 years. So there will be a lot of attention. Rare attention, Jill, at a baseball game to the umpire this weekend.
It is Friday. Cheers to the freaking weekend. Time for what we are watching, reading, and eating. Moshe, what are you watching?
Jill, I haven't seen the F1 movie, which I understand is back on IMAX this weekend, the Brad Pitt F1 movie. So look out for that. It's been breaking records globally in terms of ticket sales. So, always... That's one of the things you see in the theater that feels different, the IMAX. Joel, what are you watching this weekend?
Freakier Friday. I am so excited for this. I watched the original with my daughter a few weeks ago, and we've kept watching it as young kids tend to do with their parents. And she's the one who's actually keeps reminding me. She'll be like, is it August 8th yet? Is it August 8th yet? And I'm like, why? What is August 8th? And she's like, Freakier Friday. So we're going.
22 years in the making. Jamie Lee Curtis and Lindsay Lohan are back, everybody.
Lindsay Lohan never looked better, I should say. Okay, Moshe, it is National Book Day or Book Week. What are you reading?
Jill, I am finishing the Tim Weiner book about the CIA because I'm taping an interview with him next week. So I officially do have a book to read this weekend. But on my list for this weekend, for what I'm reading, it's actually an article from the Free Press. The title, Social Media Shortens Your Life. Here's how to get time back, which I feel like I'm uniquely suited for this story, given that I spend an ungodly amount of time on Instagram for professional reasons, obviously, but still, I'll be looking forward to its advice.
At least for me, I go on for professional reasons, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, funny dance. Oh, home decorations. Oh, an easy recipe. And it's 45 minutes later.
Meme on meme. Yeah. Jill, what are you reading this weekend?
I hate to say it because it is National Book Week, but I am reading this article in the Wall Street Journal that has been quite a hot topic in the Mo News newsroom. It's called Hook Up. College kids schedule literally everything on Google Calendar. Apparently they call it GCal, and they say it dictates students' every waking moment, from walks to class to what time they go to bed. Some saying it's kind of unnatural. So we were chatting with some of the interns in our newsroom and asking if they're obsessed with it. Ryan said, no, not really. And then Julie was like, yeah, I schedule everything.
Yeah, Juliet. By the way, we thank our interns, Juliet and Ryan, who've been great interns. This week was their last week with us. As for scheduling everything on calendar, guys, leave some room for spontaneity in life. That's my advice. Also as like a Gemini, I think we're predisposed to spontaneity, to my wife's frustration. Jill, what are you eating this weekend?
All right, Moshe, in Oyster Bay, Long Island, there is a ice cream pop-up. It's called Max and Mina's, and they're known for basically mixing ice cream with cereal, and the whole place is like nostalgia. It's filled with old covers of Time magazine. It is so up your alley as I'm talking about it. The next time you're on Long Island, we'll go. But the ice cream is awesome. What are you eating?
Jill, I've been out here in Utah and had lunch with a friend at 5 Seeds in Park City. My friend Jenna chose the spot. It was excellent. So add it to your list if you're ever in Park City. 5 Seeds.
All right, everybody, that is a wrap on this Friday. We want to thank you so much for listening to the Mo News podcast. If you like what you hear, please share this with your friends. It will help us grow. Follow us, subscribe so you don't miss an episode, review us. The good reviews in the App Store.
Only 5 stars we'll accept. Jill, have a wonderful weekend. Everyone have a great weekend. We'll see you back here on Monday.
Thanks for listening to the Mo News podcast. Have a fantastic day. I hope you enjoyed.